So I guess let's talk about that too, because I think when people don't understand construction, whether you're investing in construction or whether you're running a company or something like that, there's a few big problems. One of you mentioned is the housing crisis. Another thing is as well is like there's just a lot of sunk costs in those businesses as well. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like when you look at Frame Tech, you know, what are those big problems and what's exciting about Frame Tech in comparison?
Well, there's a long list of problems in construction. One of the problems is after 2008, you had a lot of people and a lot of companies that left the industry. They just stopped. They said, okay, we're done. We bankrupted, or it just became too hard. So you had a lot of the supply chain that left. And specifically when you're talking about building framed houses or apartments, you've got traditionally, there's a bunch of people out there swinging hammers in the sun or in the cold, and it's a brutal process.
Mhm.
So you've got less and less people that really want to be doing those type of projects. More and more people want to do coding. They want to do things that are really not out in the elements where they're getting their butt kicked. And so you've got a lack of people wanting to do it. And a huge problem in this industry is you've got delays. You've got it's hard to predict when you're building a project if and when people are going to show up, whether the weather is going to cooperate, whether it's going to rain or snow. Or we had
I'm laughing because you're saying this to me on a day that this actually happened. So we've been on like construction on our bathroom for a year. They took our not for a year, since September. They're turning our single bathroom and expanding into a half bath and everything else. And it's kind of been like some days they show up, some days they don't. Today they're like, it may or may not snow, so we're not coming. So I totally get you, man.
Yeah, and you know what? And you're out in the Northeast, and some people would say, well, that maybe the problems are different. They're actually the same problems everywhere. You've got in Arizona, we had a freaking hurricane that came in the middle of us building our facility, and I call it a hurricane. It was sideways rain that we have as we were pouring concrete. So you always have these elements. You're always dealing with this, and it puts a lot of pressure on trying to time everything. So that's one of the problems. How do you organize timeframes so you can line people up so you're not wasting time? If you've got a project and you're delayed, that's just costing a builder money, which ultimately costs the person buying the house more money because it costs more for the house. So our whole project was, how do we streamline the whole process of framing and make this predictable? And so ultimately what this looks like is we're building the house, all the pieces of the bones, the floors, the roofs, the walls inside of a facility. And then we take that, then we put it together on site, and it's our team. So it's the framing is vertically integrated. And what that means is builders, developers can say, okay, here's a house, here's an apartment that we want you to build. And within 2 weeks, they have the whole house framed on site. That usually takes 2 to 3 months, and it's very unpredictable when it's going to happen. We can tell them with precision within a 48-hour window, here's exactly when the house is going to be framed up. So they say, wow, okay, well, that's one problem you just solved. And then there's a whole bunch more, but that starts the conversation where they say, okay, how fast can I get in line to buy your product?
So I got a couple really interesting questions on that one, because he really got my brain turning now, because I'm trying to like visualize what this process looks like. But I do have to say I was dying when you talked about sideways rain, because I could only think of that scene in Forrest Gump when he's like, we had a little bit of stinging rain, we had fat rain, skinny rain, even rain that looked like it was coming up from the ground. Anyway, but I guess talking about that, Damien, like, what does that process look like then? Because you see traditional framing, like I have an idea of what that looks like. So is this like you're building a facility and logistics is a really big part of it? So then it's kind of important, where each is being built, or what does that like process side of things look like?
So what we did is we took a lot of innovation. We have our team, the co-founders with me have been involved in truss building and manufacturing for 50 years, since the 70s, literally since before you and I were alive. They were building these things. And what they did is they took all of their experience and they said, how can we automate a ton of this and use technology? So like one of the things that we did is we built this patented process to have almost no waste. So when we buy boards and we're putting our stuff together, we have literally virtually no waste. And normally it's 15 to 20% of the wood is thrown away. The dumpsters you see.
How do you do that? Because I guess like when you look at it, like it's like, you cut it or you cut it wrong, or like maybe like, okay, the piece wasn't long enough. Like obviously it's patented, so you can probably only say so much, but like how do you save that much?
Well, the great thing is when you have a patent, it's all public, so we can just talk
Okay.
about it, and so that's actually fun. It's not like, oh, it's a secret black box and nobody can know.
Okay, cool.
You can see the plans on the patent site with the government. But
Well, I guess that
basically,
goes to show you I'm not a lawyer. So there we go.
well, you know, it's funny. People will say we have a secret trade, and then you're like, "What is it? I can't tell you. Just just be a part of this." You're like, "Well, I don't know what I'm getting involved with." Well, I can tell you. Normally, what happens if you have like a 10-foot wall, you have to buy say 12-foot boards, and then you cut off 2 feet of them, and that's all just waste. It just goes into a dumpster. Our process uses a thing called a finger jointer, where basically we attach the ends of each of these boards together and we glue it. So what happens is you have a stronger board, and this happens on job sites. It's already been used for a long time. We're doing that in the factory. What does that mean? It means that we can buy any size board, take those boards, run them together, and we have one continuous infinite board, and then we cut it exactly to length. So we don't have a 2-foot piece missing. We have no feet missing.
Yeah.
The only thing we have like a corner cut, and that might be a tiny amount. So instead of 15 or 20%, we might lose 1%. And so that's part of the technology. Interestingly enough, people say, well, you're gluing these pieces together. Is that safe? And the reality is it's actually stronger because the glue and the joint is stronger than the board itself. So we have this process that eliminates waste, makes it stronger, makes it more precise, and we can buy basically any size board that's available on the market, which means we don't have to buy a 12-foot board. We can buy all the 6-foot boards. So we save money there too. So we're able to do it more cost effectively, faster, more precise. Like every part of the process is better inside this system.